The story revolves around a scenario where a modern U.S. warship is catapulted back in time to witness Pearl Harbor. It is up to the crew on the ship to determine if they want to prevent the attack and possibly change the course of history. The movie opens up in the 1980s as a U.S. Navy helicopter lands on the Pearl Harbor Naval Air Station. It is there to pick up Warren Lasky, a systems analyst who works for a major weapons manufacturer, the Tideman Industries. From here, Lasky will be flown and dropped on board the USS Nimitz, one of the United States' largest aircraft carriers. The reclusive CEO of the industry, Mr. Tideman, had previously ordered Lasky to also work as an efficiency expert for the U.S. Defense Department. Currently, as the helicopter gets ready to depart, Tideman shows up in his car but doesn't actually get out and greet his employee personally. Nonetheless, his car stays on the helipad until the helicopter flies off, as if to make sure Lasky gets on the USS Nimitz without fail. Meanwhile, as the helicopter flies towards the massive aircraft carrier, several monuments dedicated to the Second World War are shown. They are currently flying over the Pacific Ocean near Hawaii, which is the site of the Pearl Harbor attack. Soon afterwards, Lasky boards the USS Nimitz, which is currently carrying out naval exercises in the mid-Pacific Ocean. Inside the control room, the ship's captain, Matthew Yelland, oversees training flights of the fighter jets that the ship is carrying. On this training session, the ship has several F-14A Tomcat, which are all-weather, supersonic fighter jets. Alongside it is also carrying a few A-7 Corsairs, which are subsonic fighter bombers, and other aircrafts and helicopters. Captain Yelland looks on as two F-14 Tomcats land on the ship's runway without any problem. Soon, Warren Lasky joins him in the control room, and the two formally introduce each other. From their conversation, it is revealed that Richard Tideman actually delayed the departure of the USS Nimitz by 2 days for unknown reasons. The captain is clearly irritated by this, but Lasky tells him that he barely gets to talk to Richard Tideman face-to-face. Sensing a tension between the captain and the guest, the ship's executive officer, Commander Dan Thurman, intervenes. He points out that Richard Tideman gets to ask for some special favors because his industry designed and built the USS Nimitz. Following this, the captain resumes his duty, overlooking the landing of an A-7 Corsair bomber. He is puzzled when the weather takes a sudden turn for the worse, as the bright blue skies get replaced with thundering clouds and rain. According to the reports handed to him that morning, the whole day was supposed to be sunny and good for flights. On the lower level of the ship, Meteorological Officer Black Cloud receives a forecast of strange clouds forming nearby. In the meantime, the ship's corporal escorts Lasky to the navigator's import cabin. This small but functional room is adjacent to another cabin where the ship's air wing commander, Dick Owens, lives. Finding himself alone, Lasky explores both the cabins and stumbles upon a manuscript about World War II on a table. His investigation is interrupted as Commander Owens, the cabin's owner and the author of the manuscript, enters. Owens expresses displeasure at Lasky's intrusion and requests him not to repeat it. One of the ship's sonar crew notices a large and unusual storm approaching the Nimitz despite earlier reports of clear weather. The contact between the aircraft carrier and the fighter jets trying to land is lost due to the storm's interference. Captain Yelland summons Meteorological Officer Black Cloud to the command room. Soon afterwards, he arrives with bad news. The water temperature around the ship has plummeted by 5 degrees, while the pressure is continuously rising instead of decreasing. Additionally, dark clouds form and dissipate radically, leaving Black Cloud bewildered by the phenomenon. In the meantime, Commander Dick Owens also arrives in his station. Just like everyone else, he too is puzzled by the sudden change in weather. But he is extra worried because one of the A-7 Corsairs is being flown by a rookie pilot. To make matters worse, the communication between the Corsair bomber and the command section is continuously interrupted. Just then, Commander Owens gets a call from Yelland. The captain says that he urgently wants all the jets to return on board, as he does not want the ship to remain in such weather conditions. Following this, Commander Owens urgently orders the rookie pilot to land. But through a patchy radio connection, the pilot says that his plane's landing hook has been damaged as he cannot get it to work. This message is quickly relayed back to Captain Yelland, who issues a ship-wide emergency. The entire crew comes up to the runway and quickly puts together the emergency landing nets at one end of the deck. Just as the crew empties the runway in preparation for a potentially dangerous landing, a mysterious vortex approaches the Nimitz. Commander Owens watches on in horror as bright swirling clouds begin to open a sort of portal right in front of the ship. A sharp, high-frequency noise penetrates the airwaves, bringing everyone down to their knees in pain. The strange phenomenon also fries up several electronic devices as the ship continues to navigate through the peculiar electromagnetic portal. In a strange twist, the storm ends as abruptly as it began, and the ship emerges mostly unharmed. The crew quickly regains composure, after which Captain Yelland declares a state of emergency. All the crew members shut the doors to the command center of the ship and take their respective positions. Suddenly, the A-7 Corsair being flown by the rookie pilot is spotted nearby. The crew watches nervously as it approaches the runway shakily. Fortunately, the bomber lands successfully with only a minor crash, and the pilot is taken for medical attention. Next, Yelland orders reports from all stations, and the ship appears to be in perfect order. However, soon the military notices that their radars and other equipment are down. They are incapable of sending signals except for a range of 200 meters around the ship. Even though they seem to be exactly in the same position as they were before the storm, the radars cannot pick up any other ships that were there only a few moments ago. This malfunction caused them to lose all contact with the base command at Pearl Harbor. In the next scene, Yelland orders Commander Owens to send helicopters and reconnaissance planes towards the base. He then gathers the commanders of all units for an emergency meeting. Below, one of the officers working on radio communications thinks all this is a test from the Pearl Harbor base. However, the captain does not think so, as he suspects that the strange phenomenon could be due to a nuclear strike. In the meeting with the heads of all the units, he asks everyone to be ready for a scenario of war. The ship has tried to establish contact with every possible base, including White House, but to no avail. However, the reconnaissance jets that flew towards Pearl Harbor report that everything there is normal and shows no sign of a nuclear attack. Just then, the radio operator of the ship receives strange broadcasts from Hawaii. They sound like classic radio from the pre-World War II era, leaving everyone puzzled. Shortly thereafter, the ship's radar operator reports the presence of a small boat several hundred miles from the Nimitz. The captain sends 2 F-14A jets to investigate the area. The scene shifts to the small boat, which happens to be the personal yacht of popular Senator Samuel Chapman. Currently, he is taking a cruise, listening to a radio broadcast and discussing politics with his friend, Arthur. Also on board are the senator's secretary, Laurel Scott, and her dog, Charlie. Soon, the excited dog rushes onto the deck and barks, looking at the sky. Sure enough, the 2 F-14A fighters fly overhead with blinding speed. Unable to comprehend the speed of the jets, the senator orders Laurel to ask for investigation when they return back to the office. The pilots report back to the captain that they have spotted an old, well-preserved civilian yacht flying the U.S. flag. Yelland orders them to continue observation and sends refueling aircraft to them. Meanwhile, on the Nimitz, the crew listens to the only available radio broadcast, which is airing a 40-year-old boxing match. A visibly irritated Captain Yelland turns off the broadcast and goes to get some fresh air with Executive Officer Dan Thurman and Lasky. He asks Thurman for his opinions on what is happening currently. The officer replies that the radio is simply airing nostalgic music and sports, but Yelland dismisses this suggestion. On the other hand, Lasky expresses a very peculiar opinion. He speculates that everything happening could be part of a secret naval exercise that the crew of the USS Nimitz was not informed beforehand. Both Thurman and the captain find this idea credible and question Lasky if he knows anything since he works for the U.S. Defense Department. In response, Lasky says he is just as clueless as they are. Just then, a junior crew member urgently calls the captain to the radio room. Yelland and Thurman make their way to the room only to find another strange radio broadcast being aired. This time, it is a news broadcast talking about the impending German attack on the USSR. To add to their bewilderment, the photos of Pearl Harbor base, taken by the reconnaissance aircraft, arrive. The photos prompt Yelland to bring up Lasky for further intel. The efficiency expert watches in amazement as the photos show Pearl Harbor base, but before it was attacked in 1941. Lasky immediately asks the captain to summon the ship's wing commander, Richard Owens, who is also a World War II history expert. He compares the shots to several photos from the Smithsonian Museum that he has. He then determines that they are nearly identical, as all the pre-war monuments seem to be intact. The photo taken by the reconnaissance aircraft less than an hour ago also shows a fleet in Pearl Harbor. This is exactly the same fleet that was sunk by the Japanese Imperial Air Force nearly 40 years ago. Meanwhile, the F-14 Tomcats that were sent to overlook the yacht received word of another pair of radar contacts. After they refuel in midair, they detect two Japanese Mitsubishi A-6M Zero fighters jets, commonly known as Zero planes. The American pilots promptly inform the captain, who orders them to continue monitoring the Japanese plane's trajectory. Later, Yelland, alongside the commanders Owens and Thurman and Lasky, endeavors to unravel the strange phenomenon unfolding before them. He thinks that somebody, for some reason, wants them to believe they are back in 1941, but he has no idea who would want such a thing. Thurman places the blame on the Russians for the unfolding events, while Lasky proposes a more radical notion. The efficiency expert says there is a possibility that they've been inexplicably transported back through time to 40 years ago. However, the military personnel dismiss this idea as implausible. Lasky further reiterates his view and points to the unprecedented nature of the mysterious storm they encountered. He is convinced that this situation stems from the influence of little-understood cosmic forces such as black holes, antimatter, and space-time warping. Captain Yelland finds this explanation peculiar and seeks some more grounded rationale for the events. Meanwhile, enemy Zero fighters jets approach the senator's yacht. Passengers on board watch with curiosity until they notice the Japanese flag on the planes. Suddenly, the Zeros open fire on the yacht, critically injuring Arthur, a friend of Senator Chapman. Stunned, the F-14 pilots forward the attack to the captain on the Nimitz. This is an unprecedented move, as Japan in the 1980s was a strong ally of the U.S. Owens, who appears to entertain the time travel theory, suggests that the Japanese aim to eliminate all radio-equipped objects that could warn Pearl Harbor of impending danger. To test this hypothesis, Yelland tasks Commander Owens with pinpointing the exact location of the Japanese forces in 1941. He then dispatches an E-2 reconnaissance plane to investigate the surrounding areas. On the other hand, the F-14 pilots seek permission to intervene and thwart the Japanese assault on the yacht and its remaining passengers. But the captain prohibits them from interfering, thinking that this could lead to a massive diplomatic problem with their ally Japan. In the meantime, Senator Chapman and his secretary Laurel watch in horror as the Japanese fighters' jets return towards their yacht. Fortunately, they manage to escape by jumping into the sea with the dog Charlie, while the Zero planes completely destroy the yacht. After the Japanese completely cripple their target, they make another pass and again open fire. The pilots also shoot the survivors in the water, killing the crew member. At the urging of Dan Thurman, the captain orders the F-14 pilots to make a supersonic run over the Zeros in an attempt to frighten them off. Instead, the Zeros open fire on the Tomcats, which surprises everyone on the ship. And when the radar shows the Zeros are on a course toward the Nimitz, Yelland orders the American pilots to open fire. In the ensuing dogfight, both Zeros are easily downed. One pilot uses his plane's cannons, while the other launches a missile. They report to the captain that 2 civilians from the yacht and 1 Japanese pilot have survived the skirmish. Meanwhile, the E-2 plane's radar reads that there are 456 objects on the Japanese fleet, and all of them seem to be heading southwest. That is the direction where the U.S. naval base Pearl Harbor is located. Alarmed by this discovery, the captain tasks Commander Owens with assembling a rescue team and ensuring the isolation of the yacht's survivors. Commander Thurman is then directed to oversee the safety of the rescue operations, while the remaining crew members are assigned to monitor the movements of the Japanese fleet closely. Elsewhere, the senator, Laurel, and their dog are hoisted onto the rescue helicopter's deck from the water. Chapman surveys the interiors of the helicopter with astonishment, curious about the origin of their rescuers. Owens informs him about the Nimitz, and when he realizes that the Senator Chapman from the 1940s is standing before him, he is speechless. Subsequently, the rescue team also retrieves the surviving Japanese man before returning to the aircraft carrier. When they return back to the Nimitz, Captain Yelland examines the Japanese man's personal effects and orders the translation of his notebook. Meanwhile, the E-2 continues its vigilance over enemy movements, confirming a substantial Japanese fleet heading towards Pearl Harbor. Back on board the Nimitz, the 3 survivors are sequestered below decks. Chapman, angry at being held against his will, is identified by Commander Owens. He determines that the storm that swallowed the Nimitz hours before has displaced the carrier in time and deposited them in the Pacific Ocean on December 6, 1941, one day before the Japanese sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. Owens also shares the story of Chapman himself. Just prior to the Japanese attack, Chapman and his friend Arthur Scott were both declared lost at sea under unsolved circumstances. Chapman himself was considered to be a strong contender to beat Franklin Roosevelt for the presidency of the United States. By interfering with the attack on Chapman's yacht, the presence of the Nimitz has altered history, and Chapman's survival may severely disrupt the space-time continuum. Yelland is, of course, opposed to simply executing the senator and orders him held until they can figure out how best to deal with the disruption they've started. Another larger question arises in the captain's mind. Should the Nimitz engage the Japanese fleet and air force and prevent the attack on Pearl Harbor? Thurman believes they should, while Lasky is torn by the idea, stating that this type of interference in history could have very serious consequences. Yelland grapples with the idea himself and determines that the Nimitz, bound by its loyalty to engage all enemies, no matter the place or time, will participate in the battle. Meanwhile, the Japanese prisoner converses with Lieutenant Kajima, a Japanese-speaking member of the Nimitz's crew, and demands access to a radio to contact his own superiors. At one point, Chapman's golden retriever escapes from the room where his master is being held and runs into the room holding the Japanese pilot. The pilot is able to disarm a Marine guard and seize his rifle, opening fire and killing a few crew members. He reiterates his demands through the translator and holds several people hostage, including Owens and Lasky. Owens is ordered by Yelland to tell the pilot that they are from the future, citing his knowledge of the names of the ships of the Japanese Imperial Fleet nearby. The pilot is temporarily overwhelmed by the news and is distracted long enough for Marines to move in and kill him. Yelland's intention of stopping the destruction of the American fleet at Pearl remains unchanged. As a safety precaution and the method best determined to restore the space-time continuum to normality, Chapman and Scott will be left on a nearby deserted island while the attack takes place. A helicopter takes them out with Owens to the island. Scott and Owens both jump out onto the sand. However, Chapman seizes a flare pistol and demands to be flown back to Hawaii. A crew member tries to take the pistol, which goes off, causing the chopper to explode, killing Chapman and the crew. Owens and Scott are stranded. Back on the Nimitz, Yelland addresses his crew, telling them that they will engage the Japanese Air Force as they attack Pearl Harbor. However, just after the Nimitz's strike phalanx is launched, the same sort of storm that propelled the Nimitz through time appears again. Yelland aborts the counterattack and the ship is consumed again and delivered to the same spot and the same date and time where it was initially displaced. The aerial armada emerges from the storm intact, and its aircraft safely land on the carrier. The Nimitz returns to Pearl Harbor and Lasky is met at the pier. The door of a nearby limousine opens and Scott's dog, still on the Nimitz when it was sent back into the future, excitedly runs to the limo and jumps inside. Lasky gets in the limo and sees both Laurel Scott and Commander Owens, both aged nearly 40 years. Owens tells Lasky that they have a lot to talk about.